Fam, am I visible? Am I visible? Am I audible? What I am is a minute early. I like to be very punctual. Guys, look at my handwriting. Look at this handwriting. My mom was a English teacher at James Irwin Charter Middle School, and I have very pretty, very girly handwriting for which I got. There was no end to the harassment. What's up, guys? How's everybody doing? How's everybody's week? Pretty good? We are being joined at this point from like multiple countries, which is awesome. Very legit. Um, let me know. Give me a thumbs up if you guys can hear me and see me clearly. Let's see. Okay, good. Fantastic. We're getting the thumbs up. Excellent. So it is now 1 p.m. and we do have a pretty good amount of things to cover. Last time there was some lagging. I think I froze for a second, but at this point I have the chat like immediately in front of me. So I'm able to just look right directly at it. It's not like over on this screen. This is my second live. Please forgive me for that. So yeah, hopefully that won't happen again. I'm also moving to Quantum, which is like fiber, supposed to be like way better internet service. But guys, thank you for journeying with me through Animal Farm. This is going to be chapter 2, and I am very psyched. So before we get into chapter 2, I want to give a slight recap on chapter 1. And for this one, I have removed monetization, which means you are not going to be interrupted by any commercials in the middle. I want everybody to kind of be with me here throughout this. If you have any questions or concerns or anything you want to kind of throw up there, absolutely send a super chat in. We are going to read those at the end and just kind of invite people to comment on those in general conversation. So I appreciate you guys. So as for the recap, what we got in chapter 1, I think there's like a 5-point recap here I want to go through. Number 1 is that Mr. Jones of the farm, who owns the farm, is neglectful of the animals. We saw that he kind of left the gates open and kind of left animals vulnerable to attack. He's a drunk, and he's neglecting the farm. That kind of sets us up for the quiet conspiracy that's kind of going on in the animal farm when the lights get shut off. That's point 1. It's important for us to remember. The second thing, Old Major's dream. There's an old boar on the farm named Old Major, and he's highly respected. He's thought of as very wise, and all of the animals gather in the barn to listen to what he has to say, specifically about this dream that he's had. The dream is this utopian dream about what will happen when animals are finally free from their human oppressors. And it almost reminds me of like the I have a dream speech. It's like a utopian vision of what it would be like without the shackles on and without these corrupt humans that mistreat the animals. So number 1, Mr. Jones is neglectful. Number 2, Old Major the boar has had this dream, and number 3, the dream is a call to revolution. We have to free ourselves from these humans. And there's also a de-animalizing. Remember, we called it de-animalizing of the human species, where Old Major said that they are the bare-skinned, right? They're the ones with bare skin, almost saying human beings don't have fur. And we talked about how it was important for Old Major to do that because whenever you want to oppress or give justification for a violent revolution, it almost requires, as a matter of course, that you dehumanize the ones you plan to abuse or that you plan to, stand in revolution against. So that's number 1, 2, and 3. Number 4 is this song, Beasts of England. That's going to be a very important component. It's a very important thing to remember because these animals don't necessarily speak the same languages. So some are bleating the song, the horse is neighing the song, the mice are squeaking the song. But something about music and our subscriber list, we gather around music because music is worldview transcendent. It transcends all the arguments, it transcends all the disagreements, and it touches us all in a way that allows us to come together. So this song, Beast of England, is very important for that reason. And then number five, uh, reality returns with a gunshot. Remember, Mr. Jones wakes up because he hears all these animals going crazy in the barn, and he just fires off a shot. And then all of them kind of return to this state of, okay, we're going to, rest and we're going to go to sleep. So what's interesting is they sing this song, Beast of England, 5 times. And they would have sang it all night. So the end of chapter 1 says they would have continued singing this song all night. But Mr. Jones woke up, heard the commotion, and fired a gunshot, right? And that kind of snapped them out of it. And so what that makes me think is that, hey, this uh, almost this excitement that has taken away reason and rationality has been visited upon all of these animals, to where they're just really, really excited for this revolution. So that's a quick recap of chapter 1. Now we're going to move into chapter 2. You guys ready? Oh yeah, I gotta flex. I have to flex this, guys. First edition print of Animal Farm. It's falling apart. I have little pieces. Every time I open this book, a little piece of a page kind of falls onto the desk. It's like it's falling apart on me. But I love that my wife found a first edition Animal Farm print. Legit. So chapter 2. 3 nights later, old Major died peacefully in his sleep. His body was buried at the foot of the orchard. Guys, I want to take a break right there. Old Major, the one who had gave this speech, who calls them all to revolution, he dies peacefully 3 days after his speech, and his body is buried at the foot of the orchard. The fact that he died peacefully, I think, is meaningful. He didn't go out in the way that a lot of tyrants go out, which is like in a gunfight, or by suicide, or by the overthrow of a corrupt system. He died peacefully in his sleep, and he was buried at the foot of the orchard. Guys, it's not trivial that that's where old Major was buried, because an orchard is something which sustains the entire farm. Hens and chickens can eat pieces of apples. Cows eat apples. Horses eat apples. Dogs can eat apples. An orchard sustain, I mean, even pigs, right? So the fact that old Major was buried in this orchard is very symbolic of old Major's provisions for them when he was alive. He was someone who provided sustenance. He was someone who protected them and who made them feel safe. And so this kind of makes me think that, for better or for worse, we only got one chapter with old Major in it. But as for now, I'm thinking that old Major was a good guy, or at least the plans that he had for these animals were good, in my opinion. I might be proven wrong. It's been a very long time since I read this book. So that's my impression of Old Major. Anyway, it continues. This was early in March. During the next 3 months, there was much secret activity. Major's speech had given to the more intelligent animals on the farm a completely new outlook on life. Remember that. They did not know when the rebellion predicted by Major would take place. They had no reason for thinking that it would be in their own lifetime, but they saw clearly that it was their duty to prepare for it. The work of teaching and organizing the others fell naturally upon the pigs, who were generally recognized as being the cleverest of the animals. And this is an interesting thing for George Orwell to put in there, because pigs are actually, they are in fact, some of the smartest animals on a farm. They are very, very intelligent and extremely good and careful problem solvers. So pigs are very, very intelligent animals. They genuinely are. Um, Another thing. Um, I want to go back a couple sentences. The work of teaching and organizing the others fell naturally upon the pigs, who were generally recognized as being the cleverest of the animals. Preeminent among the pigs were two young boars named Snowball and Napoleon, whom Mr. Jones was breeding up for sale. Hmm. Interesting that the animals which are being bred for sale and potentially they're being sold for their meat. A lot of these pigs are porkers. We're going to find out, right? And porkers are kept on the farm for 5 to 6 months before they're fat enough to sell. And both the boars and the porkers are going to be really, really good meat. So they might be being sold because they're a little bit too old for breeding. After a very short amount of time, a couple of years, pigs and boars are, not necessarily good for breeding anymore or reliable for breeding, and they're still good for meat. So something to think about is that there's a strong incentive for rebellion among the pigs. The pigs have a strong incentive to do a rebellion right now, right? Because they're the ones that are probably next on the chopping block. And it's just it's something that deserves careful consideration that the ones leading this rebellion are the ones with the highest incentive to get the hell out of there, right? I mean, think about that. Have you ever been somebody asked to borrow money from you and like, hey man, like listen man, I really need it. Like I need it today. I need to borrow. Do you have anything like right now? What do you have right now? I mean, if you don't have $20, you got $5. I mean, can I just get the change out of your car? It's like, bro, like you have a really, really strong incentive for some reason, right? And this is something to recognize about these porkers. Um, Mr. Jones was breeding them up for sale. Napoleon was a large, rather fierce looking Berkshire boar, the only Berkshire on the farm, not much of a talker, but with a reputation for getting his own way. Snowball was a more vivacious pig than Napoleon, quicker in speech and more inventive, but was not considered to have the same depth of character. All the other male pigs on the farm were porkers. The best known among them was a small fat pig named Squealer, with very round cheeks, twinkling eyes, twinkling arms. His arms were twinkling. Twinkling eyes, nimble movements, and a shrill voice. He was a brilliant talker, and when he was arguing some difficult point, he had a way of skipping from side to side and whisking his tail, which was somehow very persuasive. The other said of Squealer that he could turn black into white. Mm. Guys, this kind of represents sophistry. If you remember back in the days of Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, um, Socrates went to the natural philosophers. The natural philosophers of his day would have been the scientists, right? And he noticed that among the natural philosophers or scientists, that they found facts, but not the reasons for the facts. So Socrates asked, how now shall we live? You're finding like a lot of facts about nature, but how is this life applicable, right? Yeah, you understand what this is made of and you have some guesses about what's fundamental, but how do we live according to those principles? There's nothing really life applicable here. So then he left the natural philosophers and went and visited the sophists. And the sophists were just like politicians. They would write speeches for the conservative politicians, then they would go right across the street and write another speech for the liberal politician. They didn't care about the truth like the natural philosopher or scientist did. All they cared about was relevance. Do I sound relevant? How relevant do I sound? And consequently, now we have a lot of politicians that just get by off platitudes that don't really mean much. Well, it seems like Squealer is going to be one of those one of those sophists who just knows how to make something sound really good without necessarily having much substance. It says of him he was very persuasive. The others said of Squealer that he could turn black into white. All right. These three had elaborated old Major's teaching into a complete system of thought, to which they gave the name animalism. Several nights a week, After Mr. Jones was asleep, they held secret meetings in the barn and expounded the principles of animalism to the others. At the beginning, they met with much stupidity and apathy. Some of the animals talked of the of loyalty to Mr. Jones, whom they referred to as Master. Guys, this is one of the things that I was really wondering about because some of these animals feel like they have this loyalty to Mr. Jones. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Stockholm syndrome or capture bonding. When someone is captured or someone is mistreated by a tyrant, it's possible to like fall in love with your tyrant or to have a sense of admiration for the person who's abusing you. The best example is Samuel L. Jackson in the movie Django. You guys remember Samuel L. Jackson's character in Django? So Samuel L. Jackson is a slave and he's a house slave. And he's just in love with the master because the master is the only one which gives him any authority over the other slaves and gives them kind of a sense of prestige. Uh, and you know, some of the animals are just on that page. There's also this concept, guys, of meritorious manumission. I know that's a mouthful, but during the slavery days, during the American transatlantic slave trade, there was a rule that if you were to save the master's life, or let's say you were to invent something and that made the master a lot of money, meritorious manumission means you could earn your freedom or you could earn an award. You could earn some prestige based on how impressive you were to the master. Um, so, guys, there is a lot of reasons among these animals to say, hey, you know, maybe we shouldn't revolt. Maybe we shouldn't free ourselves. Maybe we have it as good here as it can possibly get, right? And how that becomes life applicable today is all of us need to transform, right? All of us need to leave the shackles behind of whatever it is we're dealing with, whatever is keeping us in the same place. We need to relieve ourselves of selves of those shackles. And sometimes we get that same intuition that maybe it isn't really worth moving forward. Maybe I should just accept what I have here. Maybe it's a little bit dangerous. Don't I owe something to Mr. Jones? Right. And so, you know, just think about these things because George Orwell wanted these words to come off of the page and into our lives. So it's important to develop an ecology of practices for making that a reality. But continuing, some of the animals talked of the duty of loyalty to Mr. Jones, whom they referred to as master, or made elementary remarks such as, Mr. Jones feeds us. If he were gone, we should starve to death. And some of this is just the admission of the inability to provide for oneself. Like some of these animals are saying, look, when it comes to this revolution, I'm not really going to be able to do much. And without Mr. Jones, uh, I'm not going to be able to sustain myself. Guys, listen, I have a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. If you guys know anything about that dog breed, that is just a warm stuffed animal. All my dog wants to do is sit on your lap. She is very uh, stressed when there are not adult human beings around, right? Uh, and guys, she would not survive a revolution of any kind. You know, so we have tamed animals to such an extent that it's not just a matter of course that they would all survive, you know, without human protection. So some of them are just kind of saying like, look, you know, uh, if he were gone, we should starve to death. And some of them are making relevant points here. Others ask such questions as, why should we care what happens after we're dead? Why should we care what happens after we're dead? Guys, think about that. I used to teach at a couple of prisons in Pueblo, Colorado. I've never been to prison. I've never been locked up before yet. You know, the night is still young. But I did some teaching in the prison systems in Pueblo, Colorado. And I went to men's prisons and I taught in women's prisons as well. And there's a funny distinction that I noticed with men's prisons and women's prisons. In women's prisons, there's like all kinds of beautiful trees, and there's like, you can get your own fruit, and you can like plant your own vegetables, and there's like vegetables for the picking and stuff like that out in the yard. And at the men's prison, there was none of that. And so I ended up asking one of the guards, is like, why do the women at the women's prison have so much like produce and stuff? And the men don't. And the guard said, look, women who came before them planted those trees. Women who would never be able to pick fruit from them, women who died or left prison long before those trees produced fruit, just decided to plant them. And then now future generations get to eat from them. But the men, and this is not necessarily a condemnation, a blanket condemnation for men, but the men just kind of have this mentality. It's like, hey, I don't want to be here. I want to get out of here. I don't want to do anything for anybody but myself, right? Um, but just an interesting aside there. Why should we care what happens after we're dead? That's another point. Or if this rebellion is to happen anyway, what difference does it make whether we work for it or not? And the pigs had great difficulty in making them see that this was contrary to the spirit of animalism. The stupidest questions of all were asked by Molly, the white mare. The very first question she asked Snowball was, will there still be sugar after the rebellion? Man, guys, we've kind of become accustomed to a comfortable life, right? Um, and I don't know. I guess we're not really sure to the extent that that's made us weak until it's time for the rebellion. Anyway, no, said Snowball firmly. We have no means of making sugar on this farm. Besides, you do not need sugar. You will have all the oats and hay you want. And shall I still be allowed to wear ribbons in my mane? Asked Molly. Comrade, said Snowball, those ribbons that you are so devoted to are the badge of slavery. Can you not understand that liberty is worth more than ribbons? Molly agreed, but she still did not sound very convinced. Hmm, she still didn't sound very convinced. The pigs had an even harder struggle to counteract the lies put about by Moses, the tame raven. Moses, who was Mr. Jones's especial pet, was a spy and a talebearer, but he was also a clever talker. He claimed to know of the existence of a mysterious country called Sugar Candy Mountain. Guys, look at after Old Major dies, there is such a drop in dignity, right? Sugar Candy Mountain doesn't even sound realistic. Um, man. Guys, are you guys noticing that like where has the voting gone? You remember in chapter 1, the rats came to hear the meeting, and the dogs chased the rats away. And then old Major said, "Wait a second, let's put this to a vote. Let's vote here and let's see, are rats part of us or are they not among our group?" And they all voted that rats were okay, and so there shouldn't be any, chasing them off. It doesn't seem like this next generation of leaders among the pigs and the boars are willing to have votes at all. They're just saying, we're going to call this thing animalism. We have structured everything that Old Major says. And guys, this is one of the biggest problems. This is one of the biggest problems. And as a religious man, I'll say this is one of the biggest problems with religion itself. Is that it's not just the spiritual book. It's not just the spiritual practice. It's my interpretation of the practice that you have to believe in, right? And it's such a repetitive cycle because it's not just the words of Old Major. It's not just the song "Beasts of England," but now you have to believe in the interpretation of Old Major and the interpretation of Beast of England by this new hierarchy. Uh, Man, it's so crazy how it just repetitively ends up that way. But Molly agreed, but she did not sound very convinced. The pigs had an even harder struggle to counteract the lies put about by Moses, the tame raven. Moses, who was Mr. Jones's especial pet, was a spy and a talebearer, but he was also a clever talker. He claimed to know of the existence of a mysterious country called Sugar Candy Mountain, to which all animals went when they died. It was situated somewhere in the sky, a little distance beyond the clouds, Moses said. In Sugar Candy Mountain, it was Sunday 7 days a week. Clover was in season all year round, and lump sugar and linseed cake grew on the hedges. Am I mispronouncing that? Linseed cake? The animals hated Moses because he told tales and did no work, but some of them believed in Sugar Candy Mountain, and the pigs had to argue very hard to persuade them that there was no such place. Here's what's interesting, guys. Um, the Sugar Candy Mountain, you guys remember Karl Marx said religion is the opiate of the masses. And there is some debate about what exactly he meant by that famous phrase, religion is the opiate of the masses. But when people are downtrodden, a lot of times they lean on superstition in order to kind of pacify themselves because their burden is so heavy. So what I'm wondering is, why wouldn't the pigs use Sugar Candy Mountain to get the animals to do their bidding? Right? It's like the pie in the sky when we die is a very good tool for causing people to, you know. So that's just interesting to me. I'm sure it'll be revealed in the future here. But their most faithful disciples were the two cart horses, Boxer and Clover. These two had great difficulty in thinking anything out for themselves. But having once accepted the pigs as their teachers, they absorbed everything that they were told and passed it on to the other animals by simple arguments. They were unfailing in their attendance at the secret meetings in the barn and led the singing of Beasts of England, with which the meetings always ended. Now, as it turned out, the rebellion was achieved much earlier and more easily than anyone had expected. In the past years, Mr. Jones, although a hard master, had been a capable farmer. But of late, he had fallen on evil days. He had become much disheartened after losing money in a lawsuit and had taken to drinking more than was good for him. Guys, I know and I understand, I think, that uh, this book is about the revolution in Russia. And I'm wondering if Mr. Jones represents Russia itself, or that region itself. Because after World War One, though Germany lost, Russia was in complete shambles. I might be wrong here, but I think Russia during both wars took the most losses, the most like human casualties. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, right? Um, but Mr. Jones, although a hard master, had been a capable farmer. But of late he had fallen on hard days, on evil days. He had become much disheartened after losing money in a lawsuit, and had taken to drinking more than was good for him. For whole days at a time, he would lounge in his Windsor chair in the kitchen, reading the newspapers, drinking, and occasionally feeding Moses on the crust of bread soaked in beer. His men were idle and dishonest. The fields were full of weeds. The buildings wanted roofing, the hedges were neglected, and the animals were underfed. June came, and the hay was almost ready for cutting. On Midsummer's Eve, which was a Saturday, Mr. Jones went into Willingdon and got so drunk at the Red Lion that he did not come back till midday on Sunday. The men had milked the cows in the early morning and then had gone out rabbiting without bothering to feed the animals. So, in chapter one of the first things that we hear is that Mr. Jones is leaving the gates open, leaving the animals vulnerable to attack. vulnerable to just walking out and getting lost. But now there's no feeding happening, right? They're going a long time without food, which just increases slowly and subtly increases the stress on these animals and the incentive to rebel, right? When Mr. Jones got back, he immediately went to sleep on the drawing room sofa with the news of the world over his face, so that when evening came, the animals were still unfed. At last, they could stand it no longer. One of the cows broke in the door of the store shed with her horn, and all the animals began to help themselves from the bins. It was just then that Mr. Jones woke up. The next morning, he and his 4 men were in the store shed with whips in their hands, lashing out in all directions. This was more than the hungry animals could bear. With one accord, though nothing of the kind had been planned beforehand, they flung themselves upon their tormentors. So the rebellion officially begins. Guys, I don't know how close you've been to the state where you're almost like at blackout mode because of your need for sustenance. My wife and I tried to climb Pikes Peak. That was a mistake. We got to the we got to the halfway point. Uh, we made it halfway up Pikes Peak, and as non-hikers, as people who don't hike often, that was an accomplishment. Okay, relax. We get halfway up to Pikes Peak, and when you get halfway up, there's like this store. It should not be there. If anything, at the halfway point, there should just be people handing you water bottles, telling you to keep going. But they have the audacity to put like this whole shop with a lounge, a place you can sit down. For people who are non hikers, you just want to turn around and go back at that point. You're like, look, we're relaxing now. We got some water. We're sitting here on this nice, comfortable sofa. Why do we want to go all the way up Pikes Peak? We made it to the halfway point. Let's go back down. It's very demotivating because of how relaxing it is, right? But anyway, when we make it all the way down, we are out of water. Like we had 2 giant water jugs in the backpack, but we're out of water. We're extremely thirsty. We get in the car and we go to like the first gas station that we see. We pull over, we get out of the car, we're all dirty and sweaty and gross and hot. And we walk in looking like 2 homeless people. And we go straight for the fridges. We open it up, grab water out. And the owner of this 7-Eleven must be completely freaked out because we just go grab giant things of water. We open them without even paying for them first. And we're just like chugging down water. And I guarantee if anyone would have tried to come and take the water, I would have at least shoved them. Listen, when you are that hungry and that thirsty, you got to understand that we are animals first. We have biological needs to take care of. So trying to take the food away from a group of starving animals wasn't the move. Listen, they threw themselves upon their tormentors. Jones and his men suddenly found themselves being butted and kicked from all sides. The situation was quite out of their control. They had never seen animals behave like this before. And this sudden uprising of creatures whom they were used to thrashing and maltreating just as they chose frightened them almost out of their wits. After only a moment or two, they gave up trying to defend themselves and took to their heels. A minute later, all 5 of them were in full flight down the cart track that led to the main road, with the animals pursuing them in triumph. Mrs. Jones looked out of the bedroom window, saw what was happening, hurriedly flung a few possessions into a carpet bag, and slipped out of the farm by another way. Moses sprang off his perch and flapped after her, croaking loudly. Meanwhile, the animals had chased Jones and his men out onto the road and slammed the 5 berated gate behind them. And so, almost before they knew what was happening, the rebellion had been successfully carried through. This kind of is the scariest part. Like when you imagine a rebellion, when you imagine being a part of, and the thing is, I've studied a lot of rebellions. Toussaint Louverture, the rebellion in Haiti. If you guys haven't heard of Toussaint Louverture, it's one of the most incredible stories. Napoleon had this giant slave plantation. Haiti was a giant slave plantation that belonged to Napoleon. And Toussaint Louverture led a rebellion, which just like was wiping out Napoleon's troop, partly due to the fact that Napoleon's men would like catch wild diseases when they were there in Haiti. But when I imagine myself being a part of these revolutions and rebellions, I think to myself like, what if it works? What next? Like, I can't believe this actually worked, right? Because sometimes you're just the desire for rebellion is it's a little bit of logic and a whole bunch of fury, right? And at this point, it was led by fury. I mean, they're eating, they're starving, right? And they're consuming food, and they just break out. The rebellion happened spontaneously. It wasn't planned to happen at that moment. Remember, old Major, the pig, had no idea when the rebellion would happen. Uh, and this was it. It just spontaneously happened as a result of being fed up with shit. But now the point is like, it happened. Wait, we won. We we won. We have the whole thing. Guys, look at this. The rebellion had been successfully carried through. Jones was expelled, and the manor farm was theirs. For the first few minutes, the animals could hardly believe in their good fortune. Their first act was to gallop in a body right round the boundaries of the farm, as though to make quite sure that no human being was hiding anywhere upon it. Then they raced back to the farm buildings to wipe out the last traces of Jones' hated reign. Now, I wonder if human beings represent private property, right? I wonder if that's what human beings represent. Um, because the animals go around the farm making sure there are no traces of Mr. Jones, making sure that there are no humans left. What does that mean? I wonder what George Orwell is trying to say about the revolution at this point. That after the revolution, you have to go around making sure that everything is held in common, that there's no more signs of this tyranny, that, the means of labor, are all evenly distributed, or at least taken away from the hands of the tyrants. Their first act was to gallop in a body right round the boundaries of the farm, as though to make quite sure that no human being was hiding anywhere upon it. Then they raced back to the farm buildings to wipe out the last traces of Jones's hated reign. The harness room at the end of the stables was broken open. The bits, the nose rings, the dog chains, the cruel knives with which Mr. Jones had been using to castrate the pigs and lambs were all flung down the well. The reins, the halters, the blinkers, the degrading nose bags were thrown onto the rubbish fire, which was burning in the yard. So were the whips. All the animals capered with joy when they saw the whips going up in flames. Snowball also threw onto the fire the ribbons with which the horses' manes and tails had usually been decorated on the market days. Now, Snowball, hang on a second. Because look, here's the thing. That horse likes those ribbons, right? You guys, the George Orwell is such a fantastic writer. He's subtly showing you. It's like, hey, wait a second. Why would you throw the ribbons in there? And I understand, ribbons might remind you of human beings, but there's something that she really enjoys. They give her a sense of pleasure, and she likes that they're in her mane. She kind of waves her mane around and likes the fact that the ribbons are there. So why is Snowball, a pig, taking something that the horse enjoys and throwing it into the fire without consulting her or explaining this to her at all? Little subtle things you have to catch, right? Because I don't trust Snowball. Snowball also threw onto the fire the ribbons with which the horses' manes and tails had usually been decorated on market days. Ribbons, he said, should be considered as clothes. which are a mark of a human being. All animals should go naked. When Boxer heard this, he fetched the small straw hat which he wore in summer to keep the flies out of his ears, and flung it onto the fire with the rest. Guys, he's giving up something which secures his well being. Think about this, right? How quickly that escalated. Snowball takes something which the horse enjoys, which is not a sign of uh, corruption, right? And throws it into the fire. And then Boxer, who is just, Boxer's really strong, but in chapter one, it said Boxer's really strong, but also kind of not intelligent. Boxer, just wanting to follow the leadership of the pigs, goes and grabs something which actually secures his safety. It keeps flies and bugs out of his ears, this hat, and he throws it into the fire in just kind of this sign of trust and admiration, uh, toward the pigs. When Boxer heard this, he fetched the small straw. And I want to check in right now. Can you guys still hear me? Give me a thumbs up if I'm audible. I'm still good. Thumbs up, yes. Good. We're strong. Excellent, excellent. When Boxer heard this, he fetched the small straw hat, which he wore in summer to keep the flies out of his ears, and flung it on to the fire with the rest. In a very little while, the animals had destroyed everything that reminded them of Mr. Jones. Napoleon then led them back to the store shed and served out a double ration of corn to everyone, with 2 biscuits for each dog. Then they sang Beast of England from end to end 7 times running. And after that, they settled down for the night and slept as they had never slept before. But they woke at dawn as usual. And suddenly, remembering the glorious thing that had happened, they all raced out into the pasture together. A little way down the pasture, there was a knoll that commanded a view of most of the farm. The animals rushed to the top of it and gazed round them in the clear morning light. Yes, it was theirs. Everything that they could see was theirs. In the ecstasy of that thought, they gamboled round and round. They hurled themselves into the air in great leaps of excitement. They rolled in the dew. They cropped mouthfuls of the sweet summer grass. They kicked up clods of the black earth and snuffed its rich scent. Then they made a tour of inspection of the whole farm and surveyed with speechless admiration the plowland, the hayfield, the orchard, the pool, the spinney. It was as though they had never seen these things before, and even now they could hardly believe that it was all their own. Guys, do you remember? You remember having a learner's permit? Because I love to embody the feeling behind books, because books are able, if you want it to, it can give you the lens through which the author is seeing reality, or the lens through which the author wants you to see these things. But they could hardly believe that it was all their own. For me, uh, the closest thing that I could equate this to is when I got my learner's permit, my driver's permit. Now I still had to have a good driver in the car, but just being behind the wheel and thinking all of these places that I used to have to to catch the bus to, I used to have to get a ride to. It's like now I just have access to the whole world. That's how I felt in that moment. You know what I mean? Um, and yeah, now driving is just a chore. um, then they filed back to the farm buildings and halted in silence outside the door of the farmhouse. That was theirs too, but they were frightened to go inside. Guys, I think that is probably one of the most important sentences in chapter 2. These two sentences together. Then they filed back to the farm buildings and halted in silence outside the door of the farmhouse. That was theirs too, but they were frightened to go inside. Guys, they just because you have overthrown your masters doesn't mean that your brain knows how to fill that void with anything healthy. Like that house has become a symbol. Remember that they couldn't even get to their quiet conspiracies until the lights went out in the farm in chapter 1, right? That farm represented a lot of things. Guys, do you guys remember when when Ren was talking about his love of dystopian literature? He was talking about how the pig not only represented oppression, but was also something that he had to feed. It's like this is a family member. It's not just destructive, it's also like a holy opponent, right? And I think that that's kind of this sense of awe that they have about the farmhouse. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of subjugation that came from this place, a lot of dominance and tyranny, especially when Mr. Jones got old. But at the same time, this is the place that fed us. This is all that we know. This is what filled our lives with a sense of order instead of chaos. And now we're kind of in this situation where it's like, wow, this is ours. That would be crazy. That was theirs too, but they were frightened to go inside. After a moment, however, Snowball and Napoleon butted the door open with their shoulders, and the animals entered in single file, walking with the utmost care for fear of disturbing anything. They tiptoed from room to room, afraid to speak above a whisper, and gazing with a kind of awe at the unbelievable luxury, at the beds with their feather mattresses, the looking glasses, the horsehair sofa, the Brussels carpet, the lithograph of Queen Victoria over the drawing room mantelpiece. They were just coming down the stairs when Molly was discovered to be missing. Guys, give Molly a break, okay? Molly's been through a lot already with her ribbons thrown in the fire, okay? Relax. I feel bad for Molly right now. Uh, they were just coming down the stairs when Molly was discovered to be missing. Going back, the others found that she had remained behind in the best bedroom. She had taken a piece of blue ribbon from Mrs. Jones's dressing table and was holding it against her shoulder and admiring herself in the glass in a very foolish manner. The others reproached her sharply, and they went outside. Guys, what's incredible about being under subjugation is you don't necessarily understand what the good life is anymore. Uh, a lot of the slaves, and I keep going to the transatlantic slave trade, right? But I mean, in any uh, form of slavery, say for instance, you're born into slavery, and I don't care what race you are or what color you are. If you're watching this live, you have ancestors somewhere in your ancestry which were born into slavery. All of us have slaves in our ancestors, all of us. Uh, so when you're a slave and you're watching the slave master live in relative luxury, at least compared to how you're living, uh, guys, how is it possible to imagine that anything could be better than that? You want to live how they live, right? You're working, you're toiling, you're expendable, you're objectified. So when you look at their life, you think that's the way things are supposed to be. And guys, that's not necessarily the case. One of the books that I recommended was Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. In that book, one of the most incredible quotes, he says, "It is not the responsibility of the master to free the slave, uh, or it's not the responsibility of the oppressor to free the oppressed. It's the responsibility of the oppressed to free himself and then go and return and free the oppressor." Right? The oppressor has become dehumanized in the act of oppressing itself. Guys, after this one, we either got to go into 1987 or maybe pedagogy. But let me know what we should go into next because it might be The Shining. Respectfully, that would be dope. Anyway, um, the others reproached her sharply, and they went outside. Some hams hanging in the kitchen were taken out for burial, and the barrel of beer in the scullery was stove in with a kick from Boxer's hoof. Otherwise, nothing in the house was touched. A unanimous resolution was passed on the spot that the farmhouse should be preserved as a museum. All were agreed that no animal must ever live there. Hmm. Guys, the animals missed something. The animals missed something. If I go back a page, uh, it says the others reproached her, right? They reproach her for, this ribbon, for daring to remember the times where she was thought of as beautiful by, the humans and maybe the rest of the farm for these ribbons. But it says some hams hanging in the kitchen were taken out for burial, right? This farmer had hams hanging in the kitchen, which means that the pigs, right? This is what hopefully, if I were one of these animals, I'd be like, hey guys, do you guys notice those hams hanging in the kitchen? Guys, maybe the pigs are like overly incentivized to be leading us. Maybe we should slow down a second and maybe make the leader of us somebody with a little bit less, you know, with a little bit less strong urgency and incentive here, right? When the hams are hanging up, I mean, that should be an indicator that it's like, okay, these pigs had the most motivation of any of us. Uh, so, just kind of something to think about. Otherwise, nothing in the house was touched. A unanimous resolution was passed on the spot that the farmhouse should be preserved as a museum. All were agreed that no animal must ever live there. The animals had their breakfast, and then Snowball and Napoleon called them together. Comrades, said Snowball, it is 6:30, and we have a long day before us. Today we begin the hay harvest, but there's another matter that must be attended to first. The pigs now revealed that during the past 3 months they had taught themselves to read and write from an old spelling book which had belonged to Mr. Jones's children and which had been thrown out on the rubbish heap. They taught themselves to read. When was that allowed? I thought that the rules were that we kind of abandon all of the human things. Guys, not only is this a violation of the anti-human rule, but it's a giant power grab, right? You can read now, right? And you kept this from the rest of the farm animals? Guys, the subtlety with which the pigs are grabbing power, right? It's just little by little by little. And there's always a good excuse for it, right? You might think, okay, well, the pigs are the smartest animal on the farm. Maybe they should know how to read. Maybe they should be dictating things to us. Even though back when Old Major was alive, we could vote on things. Maybe this is just kind of the way things are. And guys, it's so unfortunate because when you're newly freed, you desperately want a leader. A book that we're definitely going to be covering is The Grand Inquisitor by Dostoevsky. And it's very, very small. It's not even a book, it's more like a pamphlet. But in The Grand Inquisitor, uh, it's that same thing. It's like we're desperate for leadership. We just want somebody to rule over us. And guys, it can be super, super maladaptive. Amy, thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate that. And anybody else who wants to leave a super chat, we will get to all those. We will read all of them. Put all of your questions or concerns, and we'll definitely discuss those. Thank you so much for that. The pigs now revealed that during the past 3 months, they had taught themselves to read and write from an old spelling book which had belonged to Mr. Jones's children and which had been thrown on the rubbish heap. Napoleon sent for pots of black and white paint and led the way down to the 5 barred gate that gave onto the main road. Guys, one more thing about reading. Martin Luther translated the Bible into common German, right? And the church did not want the people reading the Bible, because whenever people get the power to read something, it just takes away power. It just drains the power from the hierarchy there. And Martin Luther translated the Bible into common German. And then when people started reading it, they're like, hey, wait a second. We don't have to. We can talk straight to God. We don't have to go through these priests and mediators. We don't have to, consider your opinion to be the heralded one, right? But the pigs can now read, for better or for worse. Napoleon sent for pots of black and white paint and led the way down to the 5 barred gate that gave on to the main road. Then Snowball, for it was Snowball who was best at writing, took a brush between the 2 knuckles of his trotter, painted out Manor Farm from the top bar of the gate, and in its place painted Animal Farm. This was to be the name of the farm from now onwards. Guys, let me ask you this question. Why is nobody speaking up? Is it because they're too stupid? In chapter 1, it said, a lot of these animals are stupid. And maybe stupid is a name that the pigs give some of the animals, or maybe it's just kind of a realization. There is a hierarchy among farm animals in general, and pigs do tend to be very smart. But with these power grabs, maybe there's multiple reasons that people don't speak up when they see clear abuses of power or people going too far. Um, Maybe they're trained in submission. That's a part of it too. Mr. Jones, you couldn't really say anything to his authority. You just got up, you do what you're supposed to do, you labor. Um, but it's just interesting. And it's kind of a warning from Orwell. It's like when you start to see these things, it is your duty to say something. And if you can't imagine yourself saying something when something wrong is done or when a power grab is done, then you need to develop an ecology of practices to kind of work that muscle. But it's very, very sad that no one's speaking up in all of this. I think that's going to lead to a lot of consequences in the future. Napoleon sent for pots of black and white paint. Okay, so he paints Animal Farm up there. This was to be the name of the farm from now onwards. After this, they went back to the farm buildings where Snowball and Napoleon sent for a ladder, which they caused to be set against the end wall of the big barn. They explained that by their studies of the past 3 months, the pigs had succeeded in reducing the principles of animalism to 7 commandments. These 7 commandments would now be inscribed on the wall. They would form they would form an unalterable law by which all the animals on Animal Farm must live forever after. Guys, what happened to the vote? You remember Old Major put things to a vote where everybody in the farm could like vote on things. And now instead of that, the pigs have just said, no, we are establishing laws. We have accurately and properly interpreted the words of Old Major, and now we have made them into 7 unalterable laws by which all the animals on Animal Farm must live forever after. With some difficulty, for it is not easy for a pig to balance himself on a ladder. Snowball climbed up and set to work with Squealer, a few rungs below him holding the paint pot. The commandments were written on the tarred wall in great white letters that could be read 30 yards away. They ran thus: the 7 commandments. 1. Whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy. 2. Whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend. 3. No animal shall wear clothes. 4. No animal shall sleep in a bed. 5. No animal shall drink alcohol. 6. No animal shall kill any other animal. 7. All animals are equal. Only question, guys, is who controls the interpretation of these laws, right? Who gets to dictate when they're violated, or when someone's on the outer edges, or when does it really constitute a violation? It was very neatly written, and except that friend was written FREIND, and one of the S's was the wrong way around, the spelling was correct all the way through. Snowball read it aloud for the benefit of the others. All the animals nodded in complete agreement, and the cleverer ones at once began to learn the commandments by heart. Even that, guys. Even that. The cleverer ones at once began to learn the commandments by heart. So now we're setting up, lawyers and politicians and people who you're going to need to advocate for you in times of trouble. Hierarchy, just maybe it's a natural thing. Maybe it's inevitable. Now, comrades, cried Snowball, throwing down the paintbrush. To the hayfield. Let us make it a point of honor to get in the harvest more quickly than Jones and his men could do. Guys, look. Snowball, this pig, throws down the paintbrush and says to the hayfield, let us make it a point of honor to get in the harvest more quickly than Jones and his men could do? That means work even harder than we used to? Why? Make it a point of honor? He's saying, yeah, we have to work even harder now. One of the most difficult questions when it comes to revolution is how do we not become the thing we're trying to overthrow? There's so many instances in history where you become the very thing you're trying to overthrow. By trying to cut down fear, you establish fear. By trying to protect the innocent, you harm them. Uh, but at this moment, the three cows, who had seemed uneasy for some time past, set up a loud lowing. They had not been milked for 24 hours, and their udders were almost bursting. After a little thought, the pigs sent for buckets and milked the cows fairly successfully, their trotters being well adapted to the task. Soon, there were 5 buckets of frothing, creamy milk, at which many of the animals looked with considerable interest. What is going to happen to all that milk? Said someone. That someone, guys, whoever someone was, and it may be on purpose that we're not told exactly what creature this was. But if you have a book version of this, you need to circle that sentence. What is going to happen to all that milk? Someone asked, right? And this might not be the equivalent of speaking up and saying, hey, who give you guys the right to just command us and write the commandments and establish all of this? It doesn't exactly go that far, but whoever this animal is deserves an award. Right? Someone finally said something like, hey, what's going to happen to all that milk? I'm not just going to not ask. Right? The desire is clear. uh, Jones used sometimes to mix some of it in our mash, said one of the hens. Guys, uh, it's so important. So one of them, someone said, "What's going to happen to the milk?" Then the hen chimes in. Now they've got 2 people working together. Jones sometimes would mix some of it in some of our mash. Maybe he shouldn't have mentioned the name Jones, because now you give the pigs some reason to say, "Oh no, this is all." But you can kind of see that they're starting to work in numbers now, which is really healthy if they can keep that up. Never mind the milk, comrades, cried Napoleon, placing himself in front of the buckets. That will be attended to. Yeah, I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will, Napoleon. The harvest is more important. Comrade Snowball will lead the way. I shall follow in a few minutes. Forward, comrades, the hay is waiting. So the animals trooped down to the hayfield to begin the harvest. And when they came back in the evening, it was noticed that the milk had disappeared. Guys, that's the end of chapter 2. What does it mean that the pig's leadership is accepted so easily? And you know what? Let me ask this question, and I want a two-word answer because I want to see if there's disagreement here. What makes us more vulnerable to manipulation? Hard times or easy times? What makes human beings more vulnerable to manipulation? Hard times or easy times? See, I see hard times, I see easy times. I see hard times, I see easy times. Hard, 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 hard. Easy, hard, hard, hard. I think the hards have it. There's another easy, 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 easy. Easies are making a comeback. It's like, because I think, man, it's like, uh, w- uh, I would say that as an American, we have pretty easy times, right? We're in, and maybe, I don't want to, speak for everybody. I mean, some people have a different definition of easy times, but I consider myself very privileged. Uh, but guys, when you're on easy times, you can become a commodity very quickly because we're all modally confused. And by modal confusion, I mean the being mode and the having mode. We're very modally confused. Like being mature means having a car. See that being and having confusion? In order to be in love, you have to be having sex, right? Modal confusion, the being and the having mode. And so commercials and advertisers can just make you a commodity because you're not this unless you own this. Oh, you don't own one of these? You don't own the new sneakers? Well, you must not be this. Being and having are completely confused, and you kind of become a commodity in an easy society when times are easy. But I imagine, man, when times are hard, and look, I was raised in a single family home, and the lights went out multiple times where mom couldn't afford to pay the light bill, and she would make up games, and we would play blind man's bluff, and we didn't know that the lights, that she couldn't pay the light bill. We were little kids, but she made up games that we could play in the dark. And it is, you're manipulatable during hard times as well. But I love that. I love what I saw in the chat. There was like lots of easy times, lots of hard times, where you're able to be manipulated. Because in easy times, you're always clinging, and in hard times, you're always resisting. Um, and both of those are really cognitively limited states. Guys, it means a ton that there's like 114 people watching Animal Farm, an Animal Farm reading. This was completely legit. Guys, I deeply respect and appreciate it. Um, PH4, my guy, sent 10 gift memberships. My guy, I deeply appreciate it. Um, John, always love your content. Very appreciated. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the Epiphany members. There's like a lot more members now. Um, Joni just got that super chat. I really appreciate it. Um, let's see here. And guys, what is hang on one second. Because I really want to interact with you guys on some of these questions. Okay, I think I asked most of the questions that I had for you guys. How do we avoid becoming the thing we're trying to overthrow? Why does nobody speak up when it's time to speak up? Ooh, Here is another question. Uh, eh, can wisdom be used for evil? Can there be an evil wise person? Because a lot of times when we see wisdom, we think of Gandalf, we think of Yoda, we think of benevolent kinds of wisdom. But can there be someone who's both evil and wise? Hmm. Okay. CDOG said wise or knowledgeable. Guys, I want to continue this conversation, but I also want to preserve this live for the people who just want to see Animal Farm and might be alarmed at the video being like, forever long. So I'm going to end this, but I'm going to come right back up to continue this conversation.